I want to introduce you to the next speaker. Clint Ober is probably one of, just like Patrick, is one of the world's foremost experts on grounding. What we've always been talking about over the past day and today is the nature's ability to help the body heal and provides us with all the resources, the tools that we need. And what's really amazing, the simplest and the easiest way for us to get some of that from nature is just to walk on ground barefoot. Please welcome Clint Ober.
Thank you, Al. Thank you. Okay, I've spent the last 20 years working on this project. And it's very rare that I stand in front of a group of people. So what we have this morning is I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes. Then we're going to show you about a 10, 12-minute movie, a clip for movies, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. And then Jim is going to bring up the tail end. So, and then everybody here today, there is a book and a movie for you to take with you. So please remember that. So what we're going to do, and how do I work this machine? Do I just...
Push this button here.
We can't hear you.
You just push this button to go
Okay.
forward, and this comes back.
Okay, cool.
And this is the red light.
Okay, very good. I'm going to try to speak into the mic so everybody can hear me. So anyhow, the ground therapy. Ground therapy is, what we've learned is that, am I going the right way? Well, just throw a couple of things in here. One, I've worked on this for over 20 years. We have over 20 peer-reviewed published studies at half a dozen different universities. So there's been a lot of work on this, a lot of research. And the reason it's so simple, you would not think you have to do any research, but because it is so simple, everybody can't believe it. So we had to really get down to the bottom and find the mechanisms of action that, why grounding does what it does. So anyhow, to me, it's a very simple story. It's about Mr. Barefoot and Mr. Shoes. One time when there was a pack of PhD students from one of the universities, they came in and they just couldn't quite understand what I was talking about, because we're talking about the earth being negative and the body being positive and so on. So I had to draw this picture and show that the earth is negatively charged, meaning it has about 20, 30 millivolts of electrons.
Fix this for you.
Thank you. All the help I can get, I'll take. So anyhow, the earth has a negative surface charge. What that means is negative means free electrons that can move and reduce charge. That's why everything in the electrical world that I come from originally, communications, everything has to be grounded to the earth so you can have electrical stability, so everything can function, so you can have good, clean data on your computer to your TV pictures or your sound or whatever, run it over satellites. Everything has to be maintained at earth potential to prevent lightning, static electricity, and so on. So anyhow, the earth, there is an active layer of electrons on the surface of the earth. Anything connected to the earth, a tree, it's negative, it's grounded. An animal or a human being. So in 1960, we invented plastics. And it's hard to believe that it was only 60 years ago, 58, 59 years ago, that we invented plastics. The first thing we did with plastics is we put them on the soles of our shoes. So Mr. Shoes is not grounded. But the human body is conductive, so when you touch the earth, your body goes negative 20 millivolts. You cannot have charge in a grounded body. You cannot have charge in a grounded computer, a grounded anything. That's why everything in electrical is grounded. The significance of that is the human body is the most electrical thing in the environment. Every cell in your body is electrical in nature. And electrical works at the speed of light. So there's a big difference. Just like when, how does information get from your brain to your toe in just a nanosecond? It is not necessarily through the neural system. But I mean, we have radio frequencies. We have all kinds of information trafficking. So anyhow, let's go on here. So this chart here shows since 1960 the growth of rubber sole shoes. Now, I spent 30 years in the communications industry, and one day I just asked myself, I said, I wonder, is there any consequence to humans no longer being naturally grounded? And I didn't know. And so I got some voltmeters and I started doing a bunch of tests and all of these kind of things. And over a period of time, we learned very quickly that if you have chronic pain, arthritis, any kind of chronic pain, just recent surgery, it doesn't matter what it is. If you take an electrode patch, like an EKG patch, and connect it to a wire and connect it to the earth, the pain will disappear almost instantly. And so what that is pain is generally pain, inflammation. If you have inflammation, then pain is a manifestation that you have inflammation. So what happens generally is you have a pathogen or you have a damaged cell or a cut or something, and so the immune system produces neutrophils or whatever, white blood cells. They come over and they encapsulate the damaged cell, whatever, release reactive oxygen species, and those reactive oxygens, which are shorter than an electron, they'll rip electrons away from the damaged cell and destroy it. That's how the immune system works. And throughout all time, when we were grounded to the earth, it was never a problem because your body was always negatively charged. And you can't have chronic inflammation in a negatively charged object or body. So to put that all in perspective, back in 1960, 90% of the visits to a practitioner were for an infectious disease, acute injury, and childbirth. Today, 90% of all the visits to a practitioner are for a stress-related health disorder, meaning the immune system is compromised and the system is stressed. So, but anyhow, so what we have here is I think it's the yellow is the growth of synthetic sole shoes. Leather shoes disappeared. The red line, I believe, is the growth of diabetes. And we accidentally ferreted all of these out and found the corollaries, the correlations. Then we started, you can take any modern inflammation-related health disorder, MS, lupus, autism, cancer, you can take any of them. And then so anyhow, this is the growth, and so we've correlated all of these with the growth of rubber sole shoes. Now that sounds absurd. Anybody that's in the medical world, this has to sound very absurd to you. But think about this. In the animal world, animals who live in the wild, they don't have cancer. They don't have cardiovascular disease. They don't have lupus, MS, or autism, or any of the other health-related, stress-related health disorders. Yet, all of the animals who live indoors with the owners, they manifest the same health disorders as the owners, the same autoimmune-related health disorders, the same cancers. I mean, domestic animals have a 50% cancer rate of death. In the wild, it's almost non-existent. So, this is a 20-year project that we pasted all of this together. So, earthing really, it's about putting your bare feet on the earth. Most of the time throughout all history, we were walking barefoot on the earth, we had our hands on the earth, or we were sleeping on the earth. The body's highly conductive, which I've demonstrated that to everybody that's sat in the chair. So the main thing is what we do is when you're in contact with the earth, your body is grounded, meaning it is at the same electrical potential of the earth. And the electrical potential, when we use that term, it's the amount of electrons that are able to move and reduce charge. So that's why everything in the electrical world is grounded. It's like a refrigerator is grounded. It's at earth potential. So if you touch a refrigerator, it's grounded. And the reason for that is to prevent an accidental charge. It isn't electrons going down to the earth like everybody normally thinks. It's really the electrons from the earth are coming up, grounding an object or a device. And so when you touch it, there can't be an electrical shock, because it's being absorbed by the free electrons from the earth. So I've only got a few minutes, so I'm going to try to make this real tight. And so we worked on this for 20 years, and it was about 8 years ago. We had tested everything you can possibly test, but we never really could nail down what was the actual mechanism of action that allowed grounding. How did it reduce inflammation? How did it do all of these things that it's doing? And we had our own beliefs and theories. But anyhow, we got a group of about 16 doctors together one day, and this was in Essex, Connecticut. And we had dark field and bright field and everything. So what we did is we drew blood from everybody, and we grounded everybody for 30 minutes. And then we went back and drew blood again from each one of these doctors. This is their blood. The first one, you can see you have a rouleau formation. So that's really like a static charge, static electricity. The electrons are sticking together and sharing electrons because there's not enough electrons. So when you touch the earth, ground the body to the earth, then each of the red blood cells also become negatively charged, equal to the electrical potential of the earth. And what that means is that each red blood cell now has, I'll go to another chart here for a minute. I think, anyhow, so we increase the zeta potential, and what that means is the red blood cell now is more negatively charged. It was, I think, we started out there on the average, they were like -5. And so after a half-hour grounding, they were -14 to 20 millivolts. So what that means is the more negative the red blood cells are, the more they repel each other. They can't stick together. So now, and we've always noticed that when we ground somebody for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they look 10 years younger in just a few, in 20, 30 minutes at the outside. And the reason is because now the blood is thin, like wine or like red wine, and it can get in and out of the capillaries, where if it's thick and sticky, it can't get into the capillaries and oxygenate the tissues. But you can see it most immediately in the face. So anyhow, but this is the mechanism of action. Getting, increasing the negative potential of the red blood cells, because now they won't stick together. They can get in and out of the capillaries and oxygenate the tissue, and they're carrying electrons into the tissue, because they can give up electrons and pick up another round of electrons in the next cycle. So it's really kind of neat. So this is the blood viscosity. Most people don't know what that means, zeta potential, but it's really the thickness of the blood, and what creates the thickness is the electrical surface charge. All blood cells are electrical in nature. The walls of the capillaries, the arteries are electrical, and that's how everything moves along. So, but very typically, here's what happens, and I don't know what the time one is on this, but anyway, on the average, 30 minutes. Somebody comes in, they have cold fingers, cold toes. So we put a patch on their on their hands or their feet, and within 30 minutes, the circulation improves. It normalizes 100% of the time. So if you have pain in your fingers, neuropathy, whatever, you ground somebody, and then all of a sudden, the pain goes away. Because pain is inflammation, because that's thermal. There's definitions for all of this, but I don't want to get into that. But anyhow, so the main thing that grounding does is it normalizes circulation. So the animals in the wild, they have a normal blood viscosity. When you ground a human being, then they have a normal blood viscosity. So you drink water, you can eat food, it's going to change, because you're adding electrons and so on. But if you stay grounded, then your blood, you can't have thick blood. You can't take a blood thinner. You can't, because the body just doesn't need it. So here is a diabetic, the foot is a lady with a diabetic ulcer. She was 84 years old. She came in to be in one of our studies, and we couldn't let her be in the study because of the fact that she had that open wound. She'd been going to clinical wound healing treatment for about 6 months. And so we went ahead and put a patch on her, grounded her, because it brought the pain down immediately. And she came back for 2 or 3 more treatments, about a half hour each time. And so in 2 weeks, the blood, you can see how the non-healing wound healed up. So it's all about circulation. The only reason something won't heal up is it doesn't have adequate circulation. This one over here is really neat. That's the Tour de France. We've grounded people in the Tour de France for probably 10 years. And mostly the U.S. Postal team, the Discovery team, and then a lot of the riders, they all go back and forth. But this is an accident where he fell and had a sprocket cut into the leg. The next morning is the the second one, and the third day is that one, and he stayed in the race all 3 days. Now, that would be unheard of before. So, but anyhow, so you have a more, if you have, when you improve the circulation, then you have increased, what you're doing is you're shutting down, the pain is the neutrophils, the oxidative radical, or the reactive oxygen, oxidizing healthy cells and healthy tissue. That's why you get the burning effect. But as soon as you ground the body, then the body is flooded with Earth's free electrons, so you don't get that burning effect. You don't get that. So by eliminating the what I call Vicodin pain, or the hot burning pain, so now healing is 3 or 4 times faster because you're not fighting the inflammation. The body can just go to work and recover, where otherwise it has to wait for the inflammation to subside and wind down and so on. So how am I doing on time so far? Pretty good? Okay. So one of the first things that we did when we, the first study that, the first study was an anecdotal. The second study, this was done by an anesthesiologist, because he said it's not possible for grounding to do the things that we were experiencing. So what we did is we measured cortisol every 4 hours for 24 hours in the one chart. So you can see I know the younger gals were a little high anxiety, and the older ladies had adrenal burnout and fatigue and so on. So, but their cortisol was all over the place like spaghetti. So if you're not sleeping at night, the number one thing that interferes with sleep is cortisol. If your cortisol is elevated, you've got one eye open, you're not going to sleep because you've got something, you're thinking about something, there's a disturbance, or there's something, so it's whatever. So anyhow, after we grounded them for a few weeks, then we remeasured their cortisol every 4 hours, or for 24 hours. And you can see how they all synchronized. The couple that weren't there were monks, and they got up at 4 in the morning. But the main thing is, what's neat about this is at 4 a.m., here's this cortisol climbing. And if your cortisol doesn't climb and peak out around 6, 8 o'clock in the morning, that's when most heart attacks occur, because you don't have enough energy, to get you out of bed and get you going. But anyhow, so what is cueing what's cueing the hormone cascade that's producing cortisol at 4 a.m.? So what we nailed it down to is the rhythms of the Earth, the amplitude of the electric field of the Earth. It starts to rise. After midnight, that's the lowest point, and then it starts to rise until about noon, and so all of our hormone cascades are keyed to those rhythms of the Earth, and it's it's like we have all of the circadian rhythms. We have the annuals, the whatever. So and all of the insects, especially, they're much more attuned to it. But we are too. All the hormone cascades in the body. Sleep is autonomic. If the sun goes down, the body puts you to sleep. I mean, the Earth's, that's the time when the amplitude of the Earth's electric field is the lowest. This isn't about electrons. This is just, like the Schumann resonance and those kind of things. So anyhow, grounding normalized cortisol. So that means it normalizes stress hormone. I mean, your stress hormone. So what we learned is it quiets the sympathetic nervous system down. And then, it's a whole cascade of events that benefit from improved sleep. So I can go back to any of this. So grounding improves sleep, reduces pain, big time. We did a study up at the University of Oregon with a group of athletes. They were 20-year-old young men with perfect health, supposedly. And so what we did is the only way we could legally create inflammation in the body is through exercise. So we would have them lift a third of their weight and do 10 or 20 sets a dozen sets of so many knee bends or whatever, so that in 3 days they shouldn't be able to walk. So anyhow, the people who were the placebo group, they had a significant increase in pain and cytokines on this one and so on, but basically you have a 90% less pain from delayed onset muscle soreness. This is athletic performance when you're grounded, when you sleep grounded at night. And if the ones who had the highest level of pain it took them a few days to get back into walking again. So this one is, diabetes is an inflammation-related health disorder. People can, I remember when I was young, it was a sugar this, it was that, and all these things. But it was just a couple of years ago that they finally came out and said, this is an inflammation-related health disorder. So basically, when we ground people, this was done by a study in Poland. And we have other studies here, but you can see the significant difference in just 72 hours of grounding. But what you're doing is you're reducing inflammation, and then the body goes back to normal. It starts the immune system, because if you have inflammation, the immune system is fighting all of the collateral damage from the inflammation. You reduce the inflammation with grounding, quiets that all down. Then the immune system can clean up that mess quickly, and then it can go back to work doing what it's supposed to do, which is operating normally. So. This one here is EMFs. Everybody's heard about, you don't dare ground yourself because, my God, you're an antenna and all these EMFs will attack you and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure everybody here has heard something about this if you've heard anything about grounding. Well, I've got 30 years background in the communications industry. And the reason we ground something is to prevent EMI, electromagnetic interference. So you are an antenna if you're wearing shoes and you are not grounded, but you are certainly not an antenna if you're connected to the earth, because you are one and the same as the earth, and the earth is infinitely large, electrically speaking. So, but anyhow, this one here is really neat because they took, I don't know, I think it was like 30 babies in NICU. These were preemies, and they're in a chronically elevated sympathetic state. They have all the colics and all the health problems. And so we measured HRV and everything. But the main thing from this study, there's another piece on it here later. But so what we did, as soon as we ground them, you can see that the EMFs went to zero. So anytime you ground yourself, the EMF can't affect you if you're grounded. It's only when you are not grounded. But anyhow, so there's a lot of craziness out there. But anyhow, that's why, but this is an important study because, let me find the next slide if I can. This is the vagal tone and the heart rate variability of the babies. So we had a significant improvement. It was like, I think it was 60, 70% in vagal tone. So that's quieting the autonomic nervous system, balancing the system, and increasing the power of, the heart rate variability and so on. So, and there's no placebo effect here. These were preemies. But we know it works on adults also. So anyhow, these are the more common things that we see. And we get reports from. We've done studies in the area of hypertension and all of the autoimmune. There's only one disease. Back in 2004, nobody was using the word inflammation. It was just not in the language. And I started doing this research back in '99. And Stephen Sinatra, who's a cardiologist who I started working with early on, he's the one that told me, he said, Clint, you need to, if you're affecting pain, you need to look at inflammation, because you can't have pain unless you have inflammation. But inflammation to me was you sprained an ankle and it ballooned up. So he said, no, that's not what it is. It's, this chronic inflammation. What was I trying to get to? Anyhow, so you don't have all these health disorders. So when Ritker and that group did all their research back in Boston, Mass., and Time Inc. published the story. You remember the Time magazine said inflammation on it, and it showed the body on fire. So it said what you have is you don't have heart disease, you don't have cancer, you don't have all these things. What you have is chronic inflammation, and it will manifest differently in different people based on your genetics and your environment. And I found that to be true over the years. So we all get caught up in these things, but we're forever treating inflammation. So the thing that I hope that I can leave with you is, one, nobody's going to change their lifestyle. Nobody's going to sleep in the yard. Most people are not going to take their shoes off and go barefoot, although I do. But people need to get grounded. It's important. It's especially important for the younger generations. And the older people are all going to get grounded soon enough anyway, so it's not a problem. But anyhow, you got to train the young people because they'll carry it on. So what grounding does, I don't care what your modalities are or what you do, if you will ground people while you're doing anything and everything in any way you possibly can, as simple as possible, and we use electrode patches and wires and so on, or you can have the chairs and, you know, grounded carpets that we put in the schools, all those kind of things. But you're going to have better outcomes. I don't care what you're doing, because what you're treating, no matter what you're treating inflammation. So if you can do anything to reduce inflammation, even a little bit, even 10 minutes, or whatever, you're going to have a better outcome on everything that you do. And you're going to have happier clients, more successful clients, and they're going to come back, and they're going to bring you customers. So I hope that's that's about all I have to offer. So, did I stay on time?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.